Revenge of the Bully, Chapter 15, In the Depths of the Ledges. So, I asked, I take it the photo shoot is off? Toby stepped out from behind a bend in the trail. I have to admit, he sneered, I was getting a little worried that you wouldn't come. Sorry for doubting you. He let out an evil laugh. How funny was that whole ESPN thing? I mean, why on earth would ESPN want to interview you of all people? Who would be dumb enough to file for that? He paused and held his hand over his mouth. Oh, yeah, Rishi would. He laughed some more and wiped a tear from his eye. That guy cracks me up. He actually believes you're someone special. Despite the fear coursing through my body, my anger rose when he insulted my best friend. At least I can count on him. To what? Toby asked. To always get you in trouble? Anyway, I finally got you right where I want you, Rathbone. Last year you weaseled your way out of all my plans, and this year you managed to win over my lame brother. He's athletic, but I got the family's intelligence gene. He continued to ramble on. I was only half listening. I knew that in addition to being evil, Toby was one big coward. Hey, it takes one to know one. That meant somebody else was probably lurking nearby to do his dirty work. But who? Josh and Trevor were now my friends, so they were out of the picture. I couldn't think of anyone else in Garrettsville strong enough, tough enough, or nasty enough to join them. Maybe Toby's plot wasn't as brilliant as he thought. Sorry to interrupt, I said, but I think he'll be leaving now. Not so fast. My tutor's lined up a few surprises for you. His tutor? I should have guessed Lutescrout was behind this. It certainly explained the mature woman who called Rishi about the photo shoot. My legs began to shake as my eyes swept the ravine for alternate escape routes. Toby noticed. Oh, there's no escape. I made sure of that. He snapped his fingers. Four kids wearing Wyndham Bomber sweatshirts came out from behind the bend. They glared at me with folded arms. I remembered Belichick's phone call to Mrs. Lutescrout. This wasn't good at all. I started inching back the way I'd come. Going somewhere. I spun around. Sure enough, Bruno and Bart were blocking my way. At least this time their names were printed on their shirts. Bruno smirked. I'm looking forward to the game tomorrow. I'll let you know how it turns out. And as for our little bet from the other night, looks like we'll be finding out right now how tough you are. Ain't that right, Bart? Yep. By now my legs were shaking so bad that a cloud of dust began to form around my feet. I noticed an opening to my right that separated two massive boulders. It wasn't much more than a wide crack. You're not going anywhere, Toby ordered. I've waited a year for this moment. The time has finally come to get my revenge. You're mine now, and there's no way out. What about over there? I asked, pointing to the crack I'd been eyeing. Confusion flashed across his face. What? I didn't wait to give him an answer. Instead, I sucked in my stomach and plunged between the rocks. I could hear Toby scream, Get him! As I scrambled frantically through the narrow channel. It was real tight and dark. I scraped my way through. I almost got stuck but pushed on, popping buttons off the front of my shirt. I realized this was one time being small was a definite asset. Bruno and Bart would have greater difficulty, and I knew Toby wasn't going anywhere without them. After a few feet, the passage began to open up, and I could move more quickly. I was increasing my lead, but once they squeezed through the opening, I knew my pursuers would be right on me. I weaved in and out of the twisting passage. I came around one big turn and was faced with a horrific sight. The path ended at the foot of a massive slab. I stood there gaping, breathing hard. The rocks around me rose straight up for at least 30 feet, too steep and high to climb. I was cornered. My chest tightened as I was gripped by an unbelievably powerful fear. I backtracked a few feet in case I had missed some passage. It was no good. The shouts from Toby and company were getting louder. They must have squeezed through and would soon be on me. Yes, I've been in more bad spots than any kid I know, but hearing the approach of Bruno, Bart, Toby, and the other Wyndham players was the most scared I'd ever been in my life, until I heard something near my feet go, Psst! Ah! I screamed. Was I losing my mind? I glanced down into what looked like a black hole. Two eyes glowed back at me. Was it a zombie? Was it Gollum? I fell back against the wall. Whatever it was, the creature was coming out to get me. Rodney, it whispered, and it knew my name. I got ready to bolt back to Bruno and Bart, preferring their fists to whatever this beast had in store for me. A gray hood popped out of the darkness. Rodney, it's me, Pablo. Pablo? Yeah, from school. You're not a zombie? I don't think so. Are you being chased by those guys? Huh? Oh, yeah. Then hide in here with me. It sounded like a great offer. He slid back in, and I squirmed my way in after him. The opening was super tight, but inside the hole opened up a bit and was large enough for us to both sit in. He had lifted a couple of rocks and partially concealed the opening. I wanted to ask what he was doing in a hole in the middle of Nelson Ledges, but noises from outside stopped me. I watched feet stomp by. I knew they'd be back once they reached the end. I just prayed they didn't see the hole. Sure enough, I heard a howl of confusion and anger. After another minute, I heard the grumbling gang returning. I don't understand. Where'd they go? Toby whined. You said you picked the perfect place, Bart or Bruno barked at him. You said there was no escape. There isn't any escape. I chose this spot after studying like 3 trail maps. I don't understand. Well, apparently there is a way out. My dad and the tutor aren't going to be happy about this. Let's get out of here. I heard them walk off. After a minute, I said to Pablo, that was a close one. Guys, Toby shouted from right above us. Get back here. I heard a voice coming from this hole. I knew that coward Rodney was hiding, and he's talking to himself. Great. The getting caught wasn't bad enough. Now everyone would think I was crazy too. Pablo tugged on my sleeve. Hurry, he whispered. There's a passage at the back of this hole. It's real narrow and loaded with spiders, but it does lead to an exit. That is, if we don't get stuck. My brain launched into a frantic debate. Creepy dark tight passage full of spiders, or Bruno and Bart's fists. Why couldn't I be wrestling with a simple choice like vanilla or chocolate milkshake? A booming voice yelled, We got you now, Rathbone! Okay, creepy passage it was. I motioned onward and Pablo started crawling. I went to follow, but a hand reached in and grabbed my ankle. One of the twins was trying to yank me out. I kicked back hard and felt a crunch. Oh, my nose! You're dead, Rathbone! Under other circumstances, I would have been paralyzed by fear after hearing those words, but not today. Pablo had disappeared into the dark before me. I wiggled after him on my hands and knees. Before I could stop myself, I slid down a wet, slick rock into pitch blackness. At the bottom, the passage leveled out. I heard Pablo scrambling along ahead. Wait up! I yelped in the dark. There was only enough room to wiggle on my stomach. I knew it would be impossible to turn around. Without Pablo, I'd never get out alive. This way, he said. I wanted to cheer. Thank God for Pablo. I think, he added. What do you mean you think? I screamed. I felt like I was about to suffocate and realized I could now add claustrophobia to my long list of fears. I've never done this without a flashlight, he said, but I'm pretty sure we're going in the right direction. What? Of course, if we're not, we could be in big trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked. Ever read Tom Sawyer? What? I wheezed. I didn't think this was the time for a literary discussion. Well, Pablo continued, there's this bad guy named Injun Joe who gets lost in a labyrinth of caves. What happens to him? Oh, he never finds his way out and dies. He dies? I almost screamed. Yeah, it was a real good book. Last time I crawled through here, I got home and found 3 spiders in my pants. Spiders! He wasn't helping my panic level. Yeah, they weren't nearly as bad as the big millipede thing that. You think you could change the subject? I begged. By now I had thousands of little itches all over my body. Oh, okay. Hey, I just saw this real good show on the Discovery Channel. It was about earthquakes. I bet this passageway is the absolute worst place in an earthquake. There are millions of pounds of rock and dirt above us right now. It wouldn't take much to bring it all down. I need to get out. I shouted, out. Okay, relax, Rodney. There's the exit. See the light up ahead? He was right. With each slither, more light came pouring in. I'd never been so happy to see the light peering through the cracks. I noticed the space around me getting higher and wider, and suddenly we were in a big cave. I was able to stand up and it felt great. This is a cool cave, right? Pablo asked. I nodded and sat down on a boulder. As my heartbeat gradually returned to normal, I noticed that the top of the cave opened to the sky. One wall sloped gradually and wasn't too steep. Tree roots hung down, almost like the rungs of a ladder. I looked at Pablo and smiled. So, do you mind me asking what you were doing back there in that hole? Oh, I heard people coming, so I ducked inside. But what were you doing out here at the ledges by yourself? Even in the dim light, I noticed his face sag a bit. I spend a lot of time out here, he said. Why? I asked. Well, I like to walk here from town and explore. I sketch the cliffs, but I guess that's not the real reason. I didn't ask what the real reason was. I figured if he wanted to tell me, he would. In school, I'd heard all kinds of stuff about Pablo. I knew that some of it was true and some of it was just mean stuff kids say. After a minute, he decided to talk more. You see, things aren't great at home. My mom's been away for years, and my dad, well, he drinks a lot, and, well, I don't like to spend much time there. He didn't use many words, but I got the picture. It also explained why I wore the same hooded sweatshirt every day. There was nobody at home to tell him not to. I realized my parents may be clueless once in a while, but I had it pretty good. I decided to change the subject. Hey, Rishi's using your borscht picture on Mama's website. You gotta be the best artist in the whole school. His face brightened back up. I was invited to take some art classes in Cleveland on Saturdays, but my dad won't pay for them, and I have no money. I thought of Mama's and bussing tables tomorrow night. Maybe he could join us. I might be able to get you a job. Really? You do that for me? Hey, you just saved my life. We both laughed. Anyway, I'll try. Right now, let's concentrate on getting out of here. We began our climb from the cave, taking our time and working together. At last, I gripped a root and pulled myself up and over. I felt a cool breeze blow across my back and head. It was great to be surrounded by the late afternoon light. I reached over the rim and pulled Pablo up. He looked past my shoulder, and the expression on his face told me something was very wrong. Well, 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 Toby's voice boomed from behind me. Hey, nice of you to drop in. Or should I say, climb out. Just in time, too. We were about to leave. How lucky. Yeah, how lucky. Typical Rodney luck. I'd been so eager to escape from underground I hadn't thought about what I was climbing into. Toby continued. I've waited. Bruno cut him off. No more of your speeches. He's all mine. Look what he did to my nose. Then he turned to me. You're dead, Rathbone. He began to advance. I was too exhausted to look for places to run. Anyway, Bart and the other Wyndham players had fanned out to cut off escape routes. This time I really was a goner. I'd leave him alone if I were you, a girl's voice called down through the woods. It sounded a lot like Jessica. Go away! Another female voice joined eerily. I was pretty sure it was Samantha. Bruno's eyes grew wider. Who said that? Then, from much closer, a third girl yelled, Touch him and you're dead! I was positive that voice belonged to Kayla. Bruno spun around. I'm not afraid of some weirdo ghost girls. Did you just call me a weirdo? Kayla's head popped out from behind a rock. Bruno laughed nasally, looking a bit relieved. I saw white pieces of paper sticking out of his nostrils. Get a load of this crazy one, he said to his brother. Now you're calling me crazy? Kayla stepped around the rock and came closer. Yeah, you're crazy, Bruno laughed, smiling back at his brother. Kayla howled and launched herself at him. She was a whirlwind of flying hair and flailing arms. Bruno fell back in alarm. In a second, she was on him. He held up his hands to protect himself, but soon yelped and took off with Kayla in hot pursuit. Where are you going? Toby screamed after him. She's half your size. I can't hit a girl, Bruno called back. It's one of my dad's rules. We watched them go. I don't know if I was more shocked that Bruno had run off or that Kayla actually stuck up for me. Bart, Toby said, can you please take care of Rathbone once and for all? My pleasure, he said with a grin. That would be a bad idea. This time the voice belonged to a boy. Rishi emerged from behind a tree holding up his phone. What now? Toby whined. I'm filming this whole thing, Rishi said, and I'm pretty sure none of these guys will be playing in tomorrow's football game once their principal sees the footage. What? Several of the Wyndham players yelled. It was his idea, Bart yelled, pointing at Toby. All the other players yelled, Yeah, it was Toby, get him! But, Toby blubbered. Seeing the charging Wyndham Bombers, it was Toby's turn to bolt. He ran off screaming through the trees. It was a beautiful sight. The one bomber who didn't join the pursuit was Bart. Something had caught his attention. He was standing next to Rishi. So, you're going to show the clip to my principal? That's right, Rishi said, and to our principal, Dr. Stone. Want to wave and say hi? As I get back, she's seeing it. So you're not streaming it now? Bart asked. I could see where this was going and tried to warn him. Rishi? Well, the cell service isn't the best up here, Rishi continued, smiling. Talking about video and photo technology was one of his favorite subjects. I can upload it later and I can edit it, which, hey! Bart grabbed the phone and hurled it with all his might into the depths of the gorge. Oops, he laughed. That's a 60 megapixel phone, Rishi wailed. Bart wasn't listening. Grunting, he shoved Rishi aside and moved in my direction. I'm going to finally do what we set out here for. He came at me quickly, his two huge fists ready to, Police! Freeze! This time it was an adult voice. Bart jumped and turned on his heels. Once again, I had the pleasure of watching a Wyndham football player run off frantically into the woods. Thank goodness the cops had arrived. I went to thank them, but there weren't any. Instead, my dad appeared from behind a bush. That was fun, he said. I felt just like Clint Eastwood. Did you see that kid take off? Jessica and Samantha also came out from their hiding spots. I was stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. How? Everyone talked excitedly at once. From what I could make out, Rishi and the girls had become suspicious pretty soon after I left them and decided to come looking for me. They spotted the fake ESPN sign and saw me surrounded down in the ravine. When I disappeared into the crack between the cliffs, they didn't know what to do. Kayla, it turns out, was the one who suggested they shadow Toby and the Wyndham players. And Rishi here texted me, my dad added, just as I was about to order a chocolate milkshake. I gazed at them with tremendous appreciation and relief. The bad guys had been scared off, and we could see Kayla making her way back to us. She had on a rare, big smile. She'd always been a pain in my butt, but now I wanted to go up and hug her. Someone else must have been thinking the same thing. Rishi grabbed her and said, My hero. It's heroin, you numbskull, she barked, but she was still smiling slightly and wasn't slashing at him. Jessica said, Are you okay, Rodney? Why were those guys after you? That's obvious, my dad said. They're afraid of what he's going to do tomorrow. Oh, who's this, Rodney? In all the excitement, I had forgotten about Pablo. He was hanging back near the rim of the cave. I motioned for him to join us. Dad, this is Pablo. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of him over at our place. Oh, yeah? Great. Looking at Pablo, he added, You're always welcome in our home, son. My dad was like that sometimes. In 1 second, he sized up the situation. And speaking of home, he continued, we better be on our way. It's getting late. Careful to stay on the white trail, we hiked through Nelson Ledges one last time back to the car. Once there, my dad looked at all of us. We have one more than we started with. Rishi, why don't you and Pablo join me up front? He smiled at me. Rodney, you wouldn't mind cramming in the back with the girls, would you? Yep. When it came to dads, mine was all right. And that's the end of the chapter.